Hey, salutations everyone. Welcome back to the channel here, this tactical intellectual channel. Today we have a presentation on the Swartish or Swarthy Dutch and Frisians. It's entitled Brun and Donker, and that just means like brown and dark right there. You know, like black and brown, just brown and dark. So this will be a part one of a series on the Dutch and Frisians. Now, this presentation and series will be Dutch and Frisian specific right here. Now, I will go over the migrations and settlements of other melanated people, non-melanated groups, the mixtures or mingling that created different types of people or mixed people, you know, what we know as biracial people today. And also keep in mind that some of the original inhabitants, the melanated inhabitants of this area right here, some have been cleared or expelled. Some have been, how can I put it, absorbed by a larger majority around them. So anyway, let's get into the information here. So before I get into the information, this slide right here, this is a little snapshot of the sources that shape my opinions on this Dutch and Frisian topic. Now, in going forward, we're going to talk about the beginnings, you know, the makeup, the first peoples of the Dutch and Frisian civilization. Yeah, we're definitely going to speak on the cultural saturation part in later on installments. And what I mean by cultural saturation, which is really an HVAC term, is when one element kind of mixes and blends with another element before becoming solely one element. So it's just that mixture of peoples. That's what I mean by saturation, that mixture of peoples, whether it be side by side or blended, mingling together, mixed people. So we're eventually going to speak on the modern take or the modern image that we see today, which is not a blend of people, but just one type of people. And you already know what that means. So let's go ahead and bring that slide back up where it's talking about the sources shaping my opinions. And you see that racial history of man, the races of Europe, environment, race and migration, sex and race volume 1. And we also have two other sources. Origin of the Anglo-Saxon race is one of them. And then another one I haven't decided yet. But let's go ahead and go into the first source from the book, Sex and Race Volume 1. And I'm going to read the important parts and comment and move on. Chapter 16, Miscegenation in Holland, Belgium, Austria, Russia, Poland, reads: Negro stream entered Belgium and the Netherlands after the Christian era, principally through the Jews who migrated there in large numbers from Spain and Portugal, and from the Spanish occupation of the Low Countries, which lasted nearly 3 centuries. As was said, Spain had large numbers of Negroes in her armies and Negro blood in her nobility. According to 17th century Spanish classic El Valiente, Negro en Flandes by Andrés de Claramonte y Coroy, a Negro ex-slave Juan de Merida rose to be the lieutenant general of the Duke of Alba, the Spanish commander in Flanders. The Spaniards tinged the fair skins of the Nordics of the Netherlands and created, according to Théophile Gautier, a new Flemish type with brown skin and black hair. A second race which the soldiers of the Spanish Duke of Alba have sown between Brussels and Cambrai. Another writer, Bogart Vache, claims, however, that there was a black-skinned race living in the Low Countries before the Spanish invasion. He says there are documents which prove the existence of blacks in Flanders in the Middle Ages. I have long called attention to this fact in the life of Saint Godelieve or Godelieve, written by one of her contemporaries, Drogon, a monk of the Abbey of Saint Andre Le Bruges. Margaret, Countess of Flanders, was known as Black Meg, Zwart Griet. Beethoven's blackish-brown skin and Negroid traits might have come from the Spanish stock. Indeed, he was called the Black Spaniard of Bonn. His Malay strain might have come in by a Malaysians settling in Holland. Countries as Holland, France, Belgium, England, which have colonies, usually have a considerable number of their dark subjects living in the mother country. Is that it? Okay, yeah, that's it. So really, that's telling us that there's been a lot of migration and settlement by various different dark skinned, swarthy, brunette types of people from different civilizations. You have the Malaysians. We already have evidence on that. And then the actual original Hebrews, the Yahudim or the Yahudi people. We have evidence on that. And then we have other ones. We have the Grimaldi people, the Proto-Negro and the Proto-Australoid, those types right there. And then they intermixed. Keep that in mind. We're definitely going to do a deep dive on that in subsequent videos. And let's just go ahead and move forward. So in moving forward, we're going to look at the book Racial History of Man by Roland Dixon, and we're going to look at the beginnings of this civilization here and just see how it progressed to present day. So we're going to look at page 59 in the Low Countries / Netherlands portion, and we're going to see who made up the original people. So let us scroll down and we're going to start reading a little bit. The region comprised within the limits of the present countries of Belgium and Holland is divisible geographically into two quite different areas. The northern portion, including all of Holland and northern Belgium, forms part of the belt of low coastal plains which fringe the shores of the North Sea and the Baltic. Let's drop down a little bit. In seeking to discover the character of the earliest population of the Low Countries, we are confined to the southern plateau, for only here have remains of Paleolithic and Neolithic man as yet been found. The crania of Spy and Ingus in the valley of the Meuse show that in Mousterian times, the occupants of this region were a short-statured dolichocephalic people in whom the Proto-Australoid and Proto-Negroid types were blended, although the mesocephalic character of Spy number 2 indicates that some admixture with a brachycephalic type, apparently the Mongoloid, had already occurred. So let's drop down a little bit. The Ardennes Plateau thus presents a striking contrast with the adjacent regions of France and the British Isles, where the Neolithic population was predominantly of Mediterranean type, and such brachycephalic factors as were present were in the main Palealpine. Alright, so now on page 59 at the start is giving us the geographic area, Belgium and Holland. So we talk about the northern portion, all of Holland and northern Belgium. So let's get to the character of the early population of the Low Countries, which is the Netherlands. So we see that it says that the remains of the Paleolithic and Neolithic man were found, and the people were short-statured dolichocephalic people. So we have the presence of the proto-australoid and proto-negroid mixed types of people there. So then we have some admixture with brachycephalic people too, and they attribute that to the Mongoloid type people. So then it says okay, that plateau there's a striking contrast, and then it just differentiate that with the French and British populations during the Neolithic times. And they say that was the Mediterranean type people with a tinge of brachycephalic elements. So that's another type of people there. Palealpine. Okay, so we got confirmation right there. So the bottom highlighted portion of page 60 reads, judging from the history of the adjacent region, however, we must infer a large influx of Palealpines and Alpines, and that the upland at least, and probably much of the lowland except possibly the northern coast, remained for most part of the period almost exclusively brachycephalic. By the 6th or 7th century AD, however, when the movement of the Baltic peoples was well underway, we find the Frankish crania from southern Belgium indicating a people prevalently dolichocephalic and characterized by that blend of Caspian and Mediterranean types, which is commonly called Nordic. Okay, let's drop down a little bit. A considerable series of crania of this period have been found in Friesland and Groningen, the males of which are quite comparable with the Frankish crania of Belgium, except that in addition to the Mediterranean and Caspian factors, there is here present quite a noticeable element of the proto-australoid, whose presence in the Baltic region in Neolithic times we shall have occasion to note later. So let's go ahead and move on to the book Environment, Race, and Migration, page 178. We're going to check out the highlighted portion, and we're going to get the information that we need. But we're going to start with, we already know what the Mediterranean people look like. So let's start with where it says the Great Central Wedge. Okay, so it says the Great Central Wedge of Alpine peoples is connected with the Central peoples of Asia, though the common practice of separating Europe from Asia has hidden the close continuity. The main body of Alpine peoples are of moderate stature, rather dark, with brown or black hair, and with a cephalic index of about 84. So basically that's all the information that I really wanted right there, that general profile of the people from like a racial standpoint. The complexion, the hair color, the eye color, those are the three main type of descriptors that people use when they describe a person. You know, their complexion, the hair color, the eye color usually, and then everything else fall underneath that. So that's very, very interesting right here. Let's bring up that notebook on the people who made up the early Dutch and Frisian population. As you can see, we already covered proto-australoid people, proto-negroid people or Negro people, Mongoloid, Palealpines, Mediterranean type people, Alpine people. We already covered that just a minute ago. And then Caspian types. So let's go ahead and go back to Sex and Race chapter 16, and let's come full circle with the point. And as you can see, it says, well, it's talking about Negro strain entering Belgium and the Netherlands after the Christian era via the Yahudi or the originals who migrated there from Spain and Portugal. But there's a problem with that. Now, why do I say that? Well, I say that because when you go back to the book Racial History of Man, back into the Low Country section, the time period that we're dealing with is Paleolithic and Neolithic times. So going on page 60, you see that there's evidence that the remains that were dug up were of a blend of Proto-Australoid and Proto-Negroid people. So, I mean, if you had that blend, of course you have the single version of, Proto-Australoids singularly and the Proto-Negroids by themselves to have that blend, of course. And then you have the Negro-Mongoloid people too. There's an admixture there. So you had all three elements there, then they mixed together. So that's why I say that there was a problem regarding the source, sex, and race. And that's what comparative research do. You put things in proper context and get the proper order when you do that. And there's certainly no slight to J.A. Rogers, man. This book that he produced has great information in it. It's just, hey, that's what he was working with at the times. And, new information comes out regularly and new sources are coming out. You just have to put things together, investigate, and, slide the information in where, you see fit, using logic, of course. So what else do we have? So the next part is going into the book Origin of the Anglo-Saxon Race by Thomas William Shore and Louis Earl Shore. We're going to check out chapter 5, the Frisians, their tribes, and allies. We're going to look at page 75 and taking this information to all for the purpose of being correct and true. Put things in proper context so we can look at things accurately when it comes to telling of history. Page 75, the highlighted portion reads, in the province of Drenthe in Holland, where the river Hunze has its source, there still exists a remnant of a more ancient population than the old Frisian. These people are of different physical characters from their neighbors. They are broad-headed, while the true Frisians are long-headed. They are brown in aspect, while the Frisians are fair. And they are supposed to be descendants of a remnant of the very ancient brown race of Europe who were left when their country was overrun at a remote period by people of the Gothic or Germanic stock. We have no knowledge of the physical characters of the Hunzings or Huni mentioned by B, but as these brown people of Holland who are to be found in Drenthe and Overijssel occupy the country which was in part occupied by the Hunzings, there may have been some connection between them. So some people will agree, some people will definitely disagree, but check out the word aspect right there. That's definitely a synonym for complexion because it's making that distinction. Brown in aspect, while the Frisians are fair or light. And then you drop down the very ancient brown race of Europe. Okay, you drop down some more. You can see that it's talking about these brown people of Holland, okay, in Drenthe and Overijssel occupy the country, okay. The main takeaway is talking about how these brown people, they are of a different physical character from their neighbors. The people who over time became associated with the Frisian people, but how can that be when you have a person occupying that country longer than the people who became associated with Frisians? They were brown people. So in summary, the early Dutch and Frisian peoples comprised of what type of peoples? Well, look at that keynote slide. You see that first bullet point? Proto-Australoid peoples had a presence. Proto-Negroid people were there. Mongoloid people who were Negroes were there. Paleolithics, they were there. Think Negro people. Those East African Mediterranean peoples, they had a presence there. Alpine people, we already know what they are. We already know dark skin, brown, and all that stuff. And then skeletal remains, they were there. Caspian types, they were there. So a lot of these people, they were Negroes. They lived life around one another. They mixed with one another. They did not just stay separate in their own little bubble. They produced offspring with one another. Hey, just think about it. A Negro person and an Australian Aboriginal, they have offspring. What do you think they look like? that offspring, that child, have a kid with an Ethiopian, what you think that kid look like? Come on now.